Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Chaturanga Jaya Gopi Yasodharandana Brajajanarandana Yasodharandana Brajajanarandana Yamunatira Bhattacharya Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Together. Narayanam Namastritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Tirayam Nasta praeshu bhadreshu nityam bhagavati sevaya Bhagavati utamashloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Nara Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Shila Vyasadeva, the author. For regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, whose praise with transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Jnanatirmirandasya Janashalakaya Chakshuramitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Right, while I find the verse, let's do a little recap. Do you remember anything that stood out from yesterday's class? So the four Kumaras are kind of a little upset and they just cursed. Yeah.
Vishnu was saying how his servants are so dear to him, like his limbs. This is like, I'm paraphrasing, but that was like an idea of Krishna or Vishnu. His servants are very dear to him, and he takes on the responsibility of their actions.
Yes.
Krishna's humility.
Krishna's humility, yes.
If one of those limbs is not acting right, he will not hesitate to lop it off.
Yeah.
That the four Kumaris were Brahmanitas, right? They were Brahmanandas, and that the reason why they had cursed Giant Vijay because they felt like they weren't, they hadn't transcended duality.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Vaikuntha is free from duality, so that's part of the reason they were offended, because they weren't participating properly in the game of non-dual, so they got sassy.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. There was also the factor that Krishna didn't actually take anyone's side. Or we could also say that he took both sides. He remained neutral. It's a devotee's quality. He acknowledged actually how both sides felt, and he acknowledged and accepted the actions on both sides. So he accepted the curse. He also acknowledged like both sides kind of feelings, but he also corrected them in very kind and soft words. Like it doesn't feel like a correction when you read it, but actually he's correcting them. He's like, oh, this is how like such person should be treated. This is this. And so he acknowledged and corrected both sides at the same time, and that actually confused the sages. But yeah, so there was that. And it also said Krishna didn't have any material attachments. So it makes him humble and also non-dualistic. And one important point also that we touched is that a devotee's perspective on inconveniences should also be non-dualistic, in the sense that when we have a material consciousness, we think this is good and this is bad. But when we're devotees of Krishna, no matter where we're at on our spiritual journey, it doesn't matter if you're at the beginning or at the end, Krishna is personally taking care, like taking charge of us. And so whatever happens to us is actually transcendental. There's no difference between what is considered bad and what is considered good, because in both cases, it's bringing us closer to Krishna. Okay, so on that, we can start with the first text. Brahma continued, Even though the sages had been bitten by the serpent of anger, their souls were not satiated with hearing the Lord's lovely and illuminating speech, which was like a series of Vedic hymns.
The Lord's excellent speech was difficult to comprehend because of its momentous import and its most profound significance. The sages heard it well with wide open ears and pondered it as well. But although hearing, they could not understand what he intended to do.
Okay, I actually want to stop here for some time. So in the first text that we just read, it says that, just keep that in mind, that the sages were not satisfied with what Krishna said because of anger. Basically, that's kind of what it's saying. Because they were actually, when you read the purport, it says, one of the purports, that they felt like they were still under the modes of passion and ignorance. So because they still had a little bit of that influence, they weren't able to feel peace. And so that's one thing. And then in this verse that we just read, it says that they cannot understand what Krishna is trying to do. And I thought that was really interesting because in the purport it says, and it's just rephrasing this, but it's saying Krishna's words are meaningful and precise, but despite them being meaningful and precise, the four Kumars, who are highly elevated sages, cannot understand what he says. So what to think of us? And then we're talking about his words here, but actually Krishna's plans, Krishna's actions, Krishna's decisions, they're also all meaningful and precise. And I find that trying to understand his decisions, his actions in our lives, like, why did you do this, Krishna? Why did you make this event happen? Why did this person did that to me? Is impossible. We actually cannot understand because Krishna has unlimited everything. He's super intelligent, more than anyone, really. So like, if with our limited intelligence, our little spark of self, we try to understand Krishna's mind, it's just not possible. So I was thinking, it's nice, when there's something that happens to us, to try to understand, like, generally, like, what's happening, so that we're able to move forward. But if we get stuck into finding the whys and what and etc., we'll be stuck forever. And so, talking for myself, I find that developing trust and faith in Krishna is actually what helps us move through difficult experiences. Because when it's beyond your mind, it's beyond your control, it's beyond you. So what are you gonna do? Right? You won't be able to actually do anything. And so if you actually develop this faith, develop this trust, then you can move through it knowing that you're being taken care of. And so that reminds me of a bit like when you're a kid and your parent tells you, okay, this is how you're gonna do this. And then, well, what are you gonna do? Like, you don't know how to do it. So you're most likely, maybe not, but you're gonna trust your parent and try to do it how they told you to do it. And I mean, if your parent has had good experience, like, it'll go good, it'll go fine, So if you just trust that, because they care about you. So in the same way, Krishna cares about you. So he's shaping you up so that you go back to him. So trusting him is what's gonna really help move forward. And some ways to do that, because it's really easy to say, oh, just trust Krishna. But if you don't have a relationship with Krishna, then it's going to be really hard to trust him. We can trust a parent with whom we have a good relationship because we know them and we've experienced their care and we grew up with them, but we forgot Krishna. So developing that relationship with Krishna is really important. Otherwise, trust is not going to come. And I find that expressing ourselves to him, like really opening like you would to someone that you trust, develops an actual relationship with him. And then, of course, like we thought, devotional service helps us remember our relationship with Krishna because it legit engages you in a relationship with Krishna. You serve him. Also reading, because when you read, you get to understand him, you get to understand his creation, you get to understand, like everything is him basically. So you get to understand every little parts of Krishna. And that also helps trust, because of the mental understanding. And finally, on this point, awareness, practicing awareness helps, because if you're conscious of what you're going through, of yourself, and then you're conscious of the circumstances that you're put into and how they influence you, how they influence other people, how they influence like the development of your life, then you can see Krishna's hand in all of it. Without awareness, we don't realize that Krishna is taking care of us. We don't realize that he's doing something to us for our good. But when you practice awareness, then you see, either in the moment or later on, that there was meaning behind whatever has happened. So I find awareness to be very important. Finally, something about trust is that, again, words can always be used however we want to use them. Trust could be an excuse to totally avoid the situation. Well, I'm just gonna trust Krishna, and then you don't actually like take responsibility for whatever is happening. So trust doesn't mean to reject something or become numb to something or become aphatic to something. It also doesn't mean to, like, if you understand that part, it also doesn't mean to take unnecessary amount of actions to try to change things, because it's like there's a balance between accountability and letting go. So trust means to be in between. It means to be open to what is to learn. It means to be open to having to take action. It means to be open to having to set back. It means to be open to accept what Krishna is trying to teach you, whichever way it goes. And if that's something that you can't figure out yourself, qualified mentors are always a great help for that. Trying to figure out yourself can be key if our understanding is not yet quite matured in any way. Even if it's matured, another perspective and advice is always helpful. Okay, that was a big pause for this one, but it links into what's coming next. The four Brahmana sages were nevertheless extremely delighted to behold him. They experienced a thrill throughout their bodies. They then spoke as follows to the Lord, who had revealed the multi-glories and Supreme Personality through his internal potency, Yogamaya.
The sages said, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, we are unable to know what you intend for us to do, for even though you are the supreme ruler of all, you speak in our favor as if we had done something good for you.
O Lord, you are the supreme director of the Brahminical culture. Your considering the Brahmanas to be in the highest position is your example for teaching others. Actually, you are the supreme worshipful deity, not only for the gods, but for the Brahmanas also.
You are the source of the eternal occupation of all living entities, and by your multi-manifestations of personalities of Godhead, you always protect religion. You are the supreme objective of religious principles, and in our opinion, you are inexhaustible and unchangeable eternally.
Mystics and transcendentalists, by the mercy of the Lord, cross beyond nations by seizing all material desires. It is not possible, therefore, that the Supreme Lord can be favored by others.
The goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, the dust of whose feet is worn on the head by others, waits upon you. as appointed, for she is anxious to secure a place in the abode of the king of bees, who hovers on the fresh wreath of tulsi leaves offered at your feet by some blessed devotee.
O Lord, you are exceedingly attached to the activities of your pure devotees, yet you are never attached to the goddess of fortune who constantly engage in your transcendental loving service. How can you be purified, therefore, by the dust of the path traversed by the Brahmanas? And how can you be glorified or made fortunate by the marks of Shrivastha on your chest?
O Lord, you are the personification of all religion. Therefore you manifest yourself in 3 millenniums, and thus you protect this universe, which consists of animate and inanimate beings, by your grace, which is a pure goodness, and is the bestower of all blessings. Kindly drive away the elements of Rajas and Tamas, for the sake of the demigods and twice born.
O Lord, you are the protector of the highest of the twice born. If you do not protect them by offering worship and mild words, then certainly the auspicious path of worship will be rejected by people in general, who act on strength and authority of your lordship.
Dear Lord, you never want the auspicious path to be destroyed, for you are the reservoir of all goodness, just to benefit the people in general. You destroy the evil element by your mighty potency. You are the proprietor of the 3 creations and the maintainer of the entire universe. Therefore, your potency is not reduced by your submissive behavior. Rather, by submission, you exhibit your transcendental pastimes.
Okay, quick pause on this one. I just wanted to point out that it says that Krishna is not reduced, basically. He's not reduced by his submission. And in the purport, it says, not only he's not reduced by his submission, he's not reduced by his humility, and he's not reduced also as an example by his position as a coward man when he comes, which is like kind of a humble position in a sense. He didn't come necessarily just as a king, he came as just a coward man playing with cows. And I wanted to relate it to us. Like, of course, that's different. Like, we're talking about the personality of Godhead, but we can apply this to ourselves too. Sometimes, actually, really often, we think that expressing humility or being submissive to like qualified authorities is somehow making us less. Like, we feel a lack from it. Like, did you ever notice this resistance? Like, oh, I don't want to say that I made this mistake, because if I did, then it means that there's something wrong with me. Like, there's a lack, there's something that I'm missing. Otherwise, I wouldn't make a mistake. But actually, what Prabhupada explains is that when we express humility, when we are being submissive to our qualified authorities, we're actually uplifted. It actually uplifts our character. We get closer to who we really are. We are more authentic. So rather than showing a lack in our character, it's actually showing elevation, really. And the reason why we feel this lack is because we're trying to be Krishna. So we think, I should be all perfect. I shouldn't be making any mistakes. I shouldn't be like having any issues, basically. I shouldn't be reproached anything, because we want to be like Krishna. But we're not. So when we try to be this way, we're actually self-deceiving ourselves. We're trying to be something we're not. We're being inauthentic. And that's why we're feeling a lack, because we're not true to ourselves. And when we stop this pattern of self-deception and become very honest with who we are, then we accept our position and we feel much happier. We feel much more whole, much more complete. Did you ever do something that was totally out of character? Like, I don't know, you got out angry out of place, or I'm taking an example that I did. I got angry out of place, or pursued something that was totally not like good for you, or whatever, you know? Doesn't it feel like so disempowering? Like, doesn't it feel so like there's some emptiness that comes from that? But when we're true to ourselves, we feel satisfied, we feel happy, we feel whole. So practicing humility is being true to ourselves, and it's not actually taking any away from us. It's giving. It's fulfilling. Yeah. Okay. Last verse.
O Lord, whatever punishment you wish to award to these innocent persons or also to us, we shall accept without duplicity. We understand that we have cursed two faultless persons.
Okay. Verse 20. Yam vanayortamamati shabavan vidati. Pritim nuvata danuman mahinir vyalikam. Asma suvaya uchito driyatam sadando. Yena gasto vayamayung shmahikil vishena. Anyone else wants to sing it? Yam vanayortamamati shabavan vidati. Pritim nuvata danuman mahinir vyalikam. Asma suvaya uchito driyatam sadando. Yena gasto vayamashmai. Yamvanayortamamati shabavan vidati. Pritim nuvata vyalikam. Asma suvaya uchito driyatam sadando. Yena gasto vayamashmai vishena. Yamvanayortamamati shabavan vidati. Pritim nuvata danuman mahinir vyalikam. Asma suvaya uchito driyatam sadando. Yena gasto vayamashmai vishena. Word for word, together. Yam, which, Va, or Anayo, of both of them. Dhamma, punishment, Adisha, O Lord. Bhavan, your lordship. Vidate, a word. Vritim, better existence. Nu, certainly. Va, or Tat, that. Anuman Mahi, we accept. Nirvyalikam, without discipline. Asmasu, to us. Va, or Ya, whichever. Ujita is proper. Riyatam may be awarded. Sa, that. Danda, punishment. Ye, who. Anagaso, sinless. Bayam, we. Ayunshmahi, loaded. Kilbishena, with a curse. Together. O Lord, whatever punishment you wish to award to these two innocent persons, or also to us, we shall accept without duplicity. We understand that we have cursed two faultless persons. Someone wants to read?
Sages, the four Kumaras, now reject their cursing of the two doorkeepers, Jai and Vichai, because they are now conscious that the persons who engage in the service of the Lord cannot be at fault at any stage. It is said that anyone who has implicit faith in the service of the Lord, or who actually engages in transcendental loving service, has all the good qualities of the demigods. Therefore, a devotee cannot be at fault. Sometimes it is found that he is in error by accident or by some temporary arrangement that should not be taken very seriously. The cursing of Jai and Vijay is here repented, now that the Kumars are thinking in terms of their position in the modes of passion and ignorance, and they are prepared to accept any kind of punishment from the Lord. In general, when dealing with devotees, we should not try to find faults. In Bhagavad Gita, also, it is confirmed that the devotee who faithfully serves the Supreme Lord, even if found to commit a gross mistake, should be considered a sadhu or saintly person. Due to former habits, he may commit some wrong, but because he is engaged in the service of the Lord, that wrong should not be taken very seriously.
Okay, what are the two reasons that were mentioned for a devotee's mistake? Yeah, that's the explanation, but I'm looking for two specific things that he mentioned. Yes, accidental. So an accident was one of them. Yes, temporary arrangement. So there's two ways and that are mentioned for a devotee to make a mistake. It's either an accident or a temporary arrangement. And temporary arrangement means arrangement of Krishna. So Krishna's will, basically. Yeah, like there's no point when someone else makes a mistake to try to figure out if it's temporary arrangement or it's an accident. But it's nice to know what this means. Because we all go through conflicts in our relationships. And I want to tie it to relationships because this whole thing is basically about two people arguing and making mistakes. And so, of course, this also applies to personal mistakes, but I want to tie it to that. So if something or someone is brought into your life and then it I don't know, it happens to be to bring an outcome or to bring a unfolding that is conflictual, like in this case. If it is Krishna's arrangement, then, well, basically this whole thing is about being faultless. So if you understand that it's Krishna's arrangement, then you understand that it's not actually this person that brought you something bad. It's Krishna that brought you this for bringing you closer to him. So a point that I wanted us to remember from yesterday is that when we're devotees, the inconveniences that we face are actually not inconveniences. Whether what we have is good or bad in our lives is both meant to bring us closer to Krishna. So with a vision like this, we see everything that's presented to us as mercy and as a blessing for Krishna consciousness. And I mentioned that whether we at the beginning of our journey or at the end, it doesn't matter. Because you might think, oh, this devotee is still under the modes of material nature, like it's their karma, it's not Krishna like acting in their life, it's definitely their karma. I can see that they're still conditioned. But that doesn't matter. Even if you're still, or the other person is still under the influence of the modes of nature, it doesn't matter because time is a material concept. We think about things in a linear way. We think, oh, I just started my journey, so I'm not liberated yet, I'm still conditioned. And we think, oh, this person has been like so long in Krishna consciousness and like they're definitely like less affected by the modes of nature, and so they must really be taken care of by Krishna. But actually that's a material conception because that we're thinking about a timeline. But there's no time. Time doesn't exist. Time is a conception. It's not actually true. And so if someone takes to Krishna consciousness, they're already liberated. They're already a devotee. They're already part of the spiritual world. And that's hard for us to understand because we think time-wise. We think from a material conception of things. But time is just for us to be able to live in this world. It's just a conception in our minds. And well, yeah, Krishna is time, but Krishna is making himself time so that we can live in this world, since this world is temporary. But actually, time doesn't exist. So if a devotee is taken to Krishna consciousness, he's already liberated. And so in this way, wherever you're at on your spiritual journey, you're as taken care of as Krishna as anyone else. And if you look at the other person thinking that, oh, they're conditioned, like this is actions of their karma, it's not Krishna, that's not true. They've taken to devotional service, so they're already under Krishna's care and they're being used for your good and for their own good. So that's a good thing to understand. Another thing is that what's happening in the material world is under the modes of material nature. The modes of material nature are under Krishna's control. And so our movements, the way we think, the way we move, the activities we do, our desires, like materially, like everything is actually Krishna's energy. And who's controlling that energy? Are we? No, Krishna is controlling that energy. So if you think, oh, this person or I, because it can go both ways, did this. No, actually, this person didn't do anything and you didn't do anything because Krishna is actually controlling the modes. We're all simply tools that Krishna is like playing around with, basically. So I'll get into the fact that like you could be like, oh, I don't do anything, and blah, blah. Like, okay, like for example, you could understand this and be like, oh, well, it's all Krishna. Like I didn't do this. This like it's not me. That's not quite how it works, because Krishna uses our karma, and he uses that perfectly, our karma and our conditions, and he uses that perfectly to teach each like one another. So for example, I have this condition from my past lives, and I carried it in this life, and it's preventing me from getting close to Krishna. So Krishna will pick someone who has a compatible conditions to me so that I can understand from them that I have this karma that I need to get rid of. This person didn't do anything. Krishna did it. But does it mean that I'm irresponsible for my own karma? No, because my karma came from my action, which came from my desire, which came from my rejecting Krishna. So I'm still responsible. I still have to do something, but having this understanding helps in not finding faults in the other person, not blaming the other person, because that also keeps us stuck and it's preventing us from learning what Krishna is trying to teach us. Yeah, so it could have been someone else. It just so happened that that person had a particular karma that was compatible with yours so that they can learn and you can learn, and so Krishna brought you together. That's basically what it is. And I don't know if you've noticed, but sometimes when you don't learn from that person, then another person comes later and teaches you the same thing again. And that happens again and again and then until we get it, because Krishna wants us to learn, and he wants us to get out of this conditioning so that we can get closer to him. And now quickly on the other aspects, if it's an accident, because that's what if it's Krishna's arrangement. If it's an accident, the reason why it shouldn't be taken seriously, because Prabhupada says, like in both cases, whether it's an arrangement of Krishna or an accident, it shouldn't be taken seriously, and we should still consider the other person saintly. So if it's an accident, well, the point is that it's not going to last. Like, we're still struggling with material nature because we're not, completely purified and Krishna conscious. So we're going to make mistakes. It's inevitable. But the point is that because we're in the practice, because we're practicing this bhakti yoga, we're constantly being purified, we're constantly being redirected, constantly being corrected, and our consciousness is forever evolving. And so if we make a mistake, or if the other person makes a mistake and they're in Krishna consciousness, you know that certainly they will be put back on course in some point in time. Like, yes, there are people who leave or people who take a very long time to come back, but the point is that, like, that person who left might take to Krishna consciousness in the next life. Like, you don't know. Like, we see it from a very limited perspective of like this one life, but actually, like, it's way larger, way larger than we can imagine. The point is to understand that fall down is very temporary. Mistakes are very temporary. When you've taken to Krishna consciousness, he's taking care of you, Krishna, and he's going to bring you back. So if you have faith in that process, then you can feel compassion for the other person and be like, or yourself, and be like, oh, okay, this happened, but Krishna is with me, so Krishna is within, so we'll be fine. He can be forgiven. And then, yeah, I just wanted to repeat one more time that all of this, the fact that the other person is faultless, we're faultless, accident is temporary, and like things are arranged by Krishna and we're not actually controlling anything, we still have responsibility. All of this that Prabhupada says here about the devotee being faultless is there for us to have the proper mood. It's not here to take away our accountability and responsibility. It's saying, okay, if you get offended, you should be humble and compassionate and tolerant to the other person. And then if you are the offender, then you should be humble, apologetic, taking accountability for your mistake. These are the moods that we're meant to have. But with this consciousness and with this understanding, then it's easier to have compassion both for the other and for ourselves. But it doesn't take away our responsibility. Any question? Or comment or anything else?
So we're so used to identifying ourselves with the body and the mind that it sometimes takes some time to get a practical knowledge of the fact that these things that these mistakes and so forth that we make and inconveniences are actually the operation of the modes. And even though certainly we were involved in the process, that mistake or even that sinful behavior is not who we are.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that's external to us. It would be like, getting some mud on your face and thinking, oh, my life is over. I have mud on my face. Well, just wash the mud off,
Mm-hmm.
And if we can learn to cultivate, even though we don't realize it fully, cultivate the faith that, hey, I've made a mistake. This is the action of the modes. How can I continue forward in a state of Krishna consciousness so I don't have to do that again, and allow Krishna to wash it away? And but if we're constantly identifying with sinful behavior or accidents, mistakes that we make, and saying that's who I am, we'll never really develop humility. Because humility is the acceptance of the truth. I am not my body, and I am not my mind, and I'm not the mistakes that I commit. I'm a part and parcel of Krishna, and qualitatively non-different from him. Therefore, that gives me the opportunity to actually rise above it.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes. Thank you for class. I hear a lot like Krishna's arranging this for you, and I didn't really understand that on a personal level until like we were doing the verse reading and just thinking about everything you had said, and then especially like after that, it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm special to Krishna. Like everything he's doing is for me. And I was just talking with Tulasi yesterday about like my deep-rooted desire to just feel special and like trying to fulfill that in favorable ways. And I was like, dang, like actually I'm special to Krishna because of all the things he's doing. So it took a while to have that click, but yeah, thanks for facilitating. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. Wait, I think you raised your hand first. Sorry, after. I'll come back.
I just really appreciated the point you made early, which was about Krishna's humility doesn't make him less than anything, like it doesn't reduce his godliness. There was some statement like that.
Yeah.
How we can also reflect on ourselves that when we admit a mistake, it doesn't make us less, but it actually lifts us, and it kind of like lifts the burden of us when we start accepting that, oh, I made a mistake, and we admit it, instead of like having that burden that I have to be like perfect, I have to be correct. And if we cannot accept that in front of anyone, at least we should accept that in front of Krishna, and that will definitely feels very like lighthearted. And yeah, definitely appreciated that point about humility is uplifting instead of making ourselves less.
Thank you.
For class. It was very nice. I've noticed that these patterns of being tender with yourself, forgiving, accepting, understanding, and like, oh, this is why, just looking at yourself objectively instead of like you're the center of this. Like, oh, this is what a person like me would do in a situation like this. It might not have been right, but I understand and I forgive you. And by developing this internal pattern, way of thinking, it's easier to put it out into the world. So to show tender loving kindness and awareness with other people definitely starts with your own radical acceptance of yourself and why you are. And I think surrendering to that idea that that's what's good for me. Because I've always had a problem with love. And it's just like, oh, love everything, love everything. Yes, that sounds very corny. And then I could never get outside of that because I always like was pretending to be tough, like that was the thing to do. But I think it's tougher to be more gentle and accepting. And then I think the second after that, so I'll love and I'll start doing this practice, then I develop this like spiritual egotism where it's just like, well, if Krishna is with me, I can't be touched. Like my mistakes are not mistakes and they come out to be perfect. So I almost end up getting this like arrogance, but then you should probably always look both ways when you're crossing the road, regardless. Like you're not above the cars, and it's just like you're not gonna do the Jesus thing and walk through the highway. No car is gonna touch you. Most likely you're gonna get hit. So I'm just working on, I know these things are true and they do have an effect, and not to use them to my favor. But the best thing is I actually feel better when I love and serve other people with kindness. And I'm trying not to make it like weaponize it, you know what I mean, towards my own benefit, you know. So.
Thank you. Yes.
Hare Krishna, I wanted to tell a quick past in regards to our Sikha Prabhu's point that how identification as the body leads us to take up a lot of offense or being hurt. Disturbed us. Bhakti Sukasaya Maharaj, in early days, he was in the 70s, and the segregation just was over in the United States, and things were getting up, but the racial things were still happening. He was getting some offensive comment from his godbrothers, and still happening. So he came to Prabhupada and said, "Dear Prabhupada, I'm sorry to say it, but even amongst the disciples, it's happening." And he said something that he said changed his life for the rest of his life. Just one statement. He said, "If you are disturbed by what they say, you're not any better than them. So if they come to you, if they comment onto you on the body platform, you get hurt. It's also on the same platform. So change his life for the rest of his life. Just
Thank you, Adisha, this story. Okay. All right. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Thank you. Glories of the Lord.